Hey girl,
Hi, how are you?
how are you doing?
Good.
I'm in windy, rainy Jerusalem.
Well, I'm in windy, rainy Talmon, so I just
Mm.
hope that we'll have the internet will work because sometimes when it gets very rainy, like
Yeah.
internet problems. So
Well,
in this hood of our learning, right, we should
okay.
have the merit of actually getting to learn.
Hey,
They say there a word for a mitzvah is a mitzvah.
that's true.
Hmm.
Is there any mitzvah that's relevant to sunshine? And we can ask for that mitzvah to happen.
Well, Israel, you're still new here. You have to learn how to
Appreciate
change,
the
like
rain. Yeah.
you have to real like the rain is the blessing. And as someone from California with real seasonal affective disorder, it really took me years of consistent effort to be excited about rain. And I am now. And I have my all my rainy, yummy, cozy stuff, my scented candles and my pumpkin
Nice.
spice decaf coffee and my cinnamon teas and all my,
Oh, that's a
and
good
my
idea. I might
hot
make
water
myself a nice
bottle,
ginger tea. Yeah, I
fuzzy
think that.
socks,
Mm-hmm.
like
All the things.
you got to get all the things to get excited about
Yeah,
the
a
rain
rainy day. Good for curling up with
because
a good book and writing.
exactly because it's a blessing
Mhm.
and it's really and it's a transition because I know as someone from the Sunshine State, like not so juicy, I think it's Florida, but like whatever, California, it's did not feel good to see rain, and especially when there was a lot of rain in the winter, it was very difficult. And but I leaned into it
Leaning in.
to become
Love
more
it.
Israeli, and Baruch Hashem. Okay, and I take vitamin D very religiously
I've actually
from
got some vitamin. Interesting. I've just got some right here.
yes, you need to take vitamin D every day. And don't skip because it really it's like 30 days to build up in your system. I
Mm.
start from Sukkot. As soon as the clock, like a Yom Kippur time, as soon as the clock's changed, I start with the vitamin D. Hello, Tipora. Welcome.
Hi.
Okay. People are going to come in, they're going to organize themselves. So we are starting with chapter 18. And this, now we're finally going to get into the Midav Chassidut. So we're like we're like 2/3 of the way through. And we're going to kind of define what this thing is. And that's what we've done at each time. We found the description of this character trait or this level of connection to godliness that we want to have. So first we had mindful self-awareness. Then we had motivated aligned action. Then we had like cleaning up our side of the street. And we had working on abstinence or deciding like, minimalism. What do we really need? What's holding us back that we're holding on to? And then we discussed last time was all about purity and this idea of what it means to be close to God and to have purity. And all those things have led us to be ready and prepared to engage with this idea of chassidut. So when we feel unprepared or we feel confused, we have to remember to go back and recognize, I heard something very beautiful. When it comes to healing and character work, it's not level, you're always going up. You could be at level 3 and then need to go back to level 1. And then you go up to level 4. And then sometimes you have to go back to level 2 for a little bit. And then you go to level 5. And then sometimes you have to step back. You can't get to the next level without first doing the ones before it. But we always have to circle back to the previous levels and gain more insight, more understanding, because our understanding of the entire universe and each other and ourselves expands. And so something we learned that was a simpler concept all of a sudden makes even more sense to us as we continue to expand our awareness. So with that kind of preface, we're going to start Chassidut. So once again, we are at loss for an acceptable translation. So let's try to figure out what this means. Is it saintliness? Is it piety? Is it, what is it? So just like with Zrizut, which we decided was motivated aligned action, and Nikiyut, which we decided cleaning up our side of the street, we're also going to just keep the Hebrew word Chassidut, and we'll find our modern interpretation of the word in English. So what is this thing? This trait of Chassidut requires a thorough explanation because many practices fall under this rubric of Chassidut, which are nothing but artificial Chassidut, without shape, form, or fashion. And this is due to the lack of understanding by those who claim to practice Chassidut, who try to achieve it according to a superficial understanding of it, without weighing it in the scales of wisdom. And this has given Chassidut a bad taste, causing people to think that Chassidut consists of illogical behavior, like the recitation of many supplications, lengthy confessions, wailing, bowing, self-mortification. Chassidut is not any of these things. So, right, you have a lot of people who label themselves Hasidim, people who say they practice Chassidut, and he's saying, don't trust somebody who says that they just practice something. Use your wisdom, form a strong foundation to understand what this thing is, and don't judge it, from whatever we might have heard. Ramchal is essentially repeating what he said in our introduction. There are many misconceptions about Chassidut. While there may be isolated cases where self-motivation is appropriate, by no means is this Chassidut. The Ramchal is very critical of those who practice that type, and he says it gives all Hasidim a bad name. It should be noted that the term Hasidus is not related here to the movement initiated by the Baal Shem Tov or the later movement, and did not become popular until after the Ramchal's death. The term chassid, which connotes a highly spiritual person of exemplary character, is found in the Talmud. And the appellation of chassid was given to outstanding individuals through the ages. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, who lived in the 13th century. The term chassidut is therefore not to be confused with the philosophy of the Hasidic movement. Ironically, the Gaon of Vilna, who was the outspoken foe of the Hasidic movement, is one of those who merited the title of the Chassid. Okay. So again, any pictures we might have of Hasidim with the streimels and the funny hats and the whole thing, not related to what we're talking about. We're talking about a level of spiritual maturity and greatness with stellar character traits. The root of Chassidut is contained in a Talmudic passage. Fortunate is he who toils in Torah, gives pleasure to his creator. Where the mitzvot that are obligatory and their duty is known to all, a person who truly loves God will not be satisfied merely by discharging his obligations. Rather, he will be like a son who loves his father. And if the father in any way indicates what he would like, even by a subtle hint, that would suffice for the son to understand what would please the father, and he will hurry to do this without waiting to be explicitly instructed to do so. Okay, this is really interesting, right? Can we all relate to this idea? Maybe a best friend, a parent, a child, a spouse, when you're in those throes of love and someone hints that they're excited about something and you go buy it for them. Or your kid just mentions how they love that recipe and you make it for them. You don't wait to be asked. So we're talking about this coming, anything that we're going to say is coming from this place of such sincere desire to make happy the person. It's not something that's been asked of you. And we have to say that from the beginning, because there are things that we'd be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, no one asked you to do it. These are hints to what maybe God feels, and we'll find out. Yeah, Shulamit.
I hope this isn't not appropriate, but this is a midah that was very, very much a midah of my father.
Mm-hmm.
Mother as well, and it's my father's yacht site tonight. So I wondered if we
Oh,
this
so
learning
perfect.
for
Please
my
share
dad.
something.
Oh, the amount of things. But the one thing that sticks in my mind about this is, well, when he was very young and he came over just during the war from Germany, he had nothing. Like he was just like he was always helping people to the point where he was very quick at getting things done. And he was working in a munitions factory, and all these women, they had to get away before Shabbos, and he'd already done his quota, so he used to run around doing everybody else's things as well. And during his after his funeral, I think it was at the funeral, not even at the shiva, but somebody came up to me and said, you know, years and years ago, back in the day when they just moved from, you know, everyone was immigrants from the war, and they were living like, you know, very sparsely and simply in Manchester. And one day they had a knock on the door, and somebody came, like it was a builder with a whole bunch of things like tools and units, and they were like, yeah, we've come to install the kitchen. And they were like, we didn't order a kitchen, and they were scared. They were like, no, it's all been paid for, it's done. And they only later found out it was my dad who had noticed that they didn't have a proper kitchen, so he just went and did it. It was a kind of very typical thing. We never knew about these things, like he never told them. So he just quietly did a lot of nice things for people, always.
I think that's a perfect example. We're on page 223, just
So
starting what this
name
idea
was
of Chassidut is. And Shulamit just shared a beautiful story because it's her grandfather's yard site tonight.
and my father. That
Your
was my
father, your father's yard site tonight.
Yeah.
And she was
His
sharing
name
just a
was Tzvi Ben Abraham Yitzchak.
I love that in this class, whoever the learning is supposed to be in the merit of shows up, right? With the like always. So let's learn today. Say his name for all of us. We'll have him in mind.
Tzvi Ben Abraham Yitzchak.
Tzvi Ben Avraham Yitzchak. I love it. Thank you. And we're going to learn about the Midav Chassidut and his merit. There was something very interesting. I heard this week that they said, you know, when you're learning for, you know, really righteous people who've passed. So any soldier, they even said, even anybody who was at Nova, anybody who's died al Kiddush Hashem, or somebody who you feel was very righteous, you don't say you're learning for an aliyah of their soul. Instead, you say that we're learning in their memory. Because their soul doesn't need our aliyah. It's already at the highest place.
His memory should be for a blessing.
Yes, and his impact should be felt, and more light should come in the world.
Amen.
And we're building his legacy. Okay. So earlier we discussed the great spirituality of our patriarchs, right? Whose devotion to God was so absolute they were attracted to doing what was later revealed to be in the Torah and became mitzvot, the explicit divine commandments. Whereas such perfection may not be within our reach, we are instructed in Ethics of the Fathers, the Pirkei Avot, to make his will your will. In addition to the mitzvot, which are the expressed will of God, there are other indications, which Ramchal refers to as the subtle hints as to what pleases God. Although these are not incumbent on anyone, like mitzvot, a person who has this intense love for God will strive to do whatever he believes will give God pleasure. One of the richest sources of subtle hints is the repository of the stories of the lives of the Tzadikim. The Talmud states that the narration of the servants of the patriarchs is given greater emphasis in the Torah than scholarly conclusions of their offspring. This has become the narration of the servants, provides a description of the behavior of the patriarchs, and later serves as an indicator of the things that make God happy. The principle holds true throughout the ages. In fact, all behavior should be modeled after Tzadikim closest to our time rather than those, right, of 100 years ago. We are so far removed from earlier Tzadikim that we can't really emulate them or even understand really what was happening, you know, in their context. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz derives this principle from the Talmud. Model yourself after a tzaddik closest to your generation. I think we can all agree that modeling ourselves after a relatable mentor, somebody who's reachable, but who's above us, whose life is a living example, is really helpful, because we don't know what we don't know. And it's very helpful to aspire to somebody who has accomplished something that you want to accomplish. And if the person, in my opinion, is a good mentor, then they tell you about their struggles and not only their successes. They're honest with their vulnerabilities and what they had to overcome or what they had to let go of, or what their limiting beliefs are, or the challenges they continue to face at their next level. And that's what it means to be somebody that you can rely on, because they're not this paragon of perfection where they're giving you this kind of cleansed, Instagram version of their life for you to try to emulate. But in fact, it's the real version of their life that we want to emulate, but in our own authentic way. Another example of chassidut is doing a mitzvah in the finest manner possible. A mitzvah may be duly fulfilled by meeting the minimum requirements, and one who acts because he is duty-bound may indeed do so. One who acts out of intense love for God, however, will throw himself heart and soul into the mitzvah. For example, the covering for a Torah scroll could be made out of simple material, which would suffice. One who loves Torah and wishes to beautify it will make an attractive covering out of fine material and adorn it with beautiful decorative embroidery. This is true of all other mitzvot as well. And if you guys have been to Israel and you've been to the Anu Museum, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's in Tel Aviv. You see the Bet Knesset from all over the world, small scale models and artwork for thousands of years from all over the diaspora in Israel. And if you go to the Kotel Tunnel tours and then any of the new areas that they've opened, and you see the beauty and the detail and the effort that's put into these things, I think it's very, very impressive. And we can see it today in, what's happening even during the war. People are sending Torah scrolls out to the soldiers, in battle, and people are still making an effort to make sure that it's beautiful, to make sure that they do it with kavod. When you make somebody a meal, do you put the zest on the top and make it like you would make it if you were serving it to a king? Or do you kind of throw it together, and again, know your audience. If sending the finest china to someone is more of an effort for them to wash and return it to you and not going to be enjoyable for them, send it in aluminum pans, know your audience, but still do it to the highest level of even thinking about that person and what would make them happy. Much emphasis is placed on celebrating the performance of mitzvot with joy, rather than just fulfilling one's obligation. It is for this reason that we celebrate a brit and a pidyon haben, or a completion of a volume of the Talmud with a festive meal. One of the great Hasidic masters said, when the angel Gabriel praises Israel before God for their performance of divine mitzvot, the Satan counters by citing the sins the Jews commit. Gabriel responds, granted they sometimes sin, but it's only because they cannot withstand your temptation that you place before them. However, have you seen anyone celebrate a sin with a festive meal? It is only mitzvot that are celebrated this way. And that shows where their hearts really lie. And that's why we do a Siyam here. Even when we finish the Shar Bitachon, we did a Siyam. When we finish Misosi Sharim, we're going to do a party. And I highly recommend you get together with a group of friends in your own community and acknowledge and celebrate the milestone of completing the work, just like you would do Thanksgiving meal this week, or a Super Bowl party in a few months, or any other of the Labor Day barbecue. Okay, like we celebrate things that we say reflect our values. So when you celebrate learning something new, it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And it really shows where your values lie. There is a mitzvah in Haknasat Orachim, hospitality. The obligation to
Can I
perform.
just share a quick story with you about what you said?
Sure.
When I began learning Mesilas Yesharim, it was with my son because he was locked down in lockdown, and so was I. And he couldn't get into his yeshiva. So he suggested that we learn together a little bit in the morning. And he was learning that. And I was so excited to learn with him. And after the first time that we did our Siyam, he was actually back in the States. And I said, oh, it's such a shame we can't have a drink together. I wish we could have his favorite drink is a whiskey sour and mine's a Negroni. And I said, I wish we could just celebrate together. I'd make you a whiskey sour. And literally as we were finishing, there was a knock on the door, the doorbell rang, and it was my office because we were locked down. I was working from home, and it was just like a Christmas present for us from the office, but it was a Jewish office. It was all kosher. And they sent a cocktail, or it was Hanukkah present, I don't know. They sent cocktails in a bag, and it literally had those 2 cocktails in it.
That's amazing. Bitachon story.
And Amazon sent the same day like a gift for me that I had no idea what it was. When it's from last year, it was a menorah that I'd ordered a year ago. that never came, and it just suddenly showed up on my doorstep at the same time. And I was like, what is this? So we had this really fun Siyam that just came on the door that we'd not, it was really fun. Anyway, I thought I'll share that with you because it was the same. We were learning Mesilas Yesharim, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. There is a mitzvah of having guests. And when a traveler knocks on your door and asks for food or lodging, there's no obligation to go through town looking for people. The patriarch Abraham, however, did just that. The Midrash states that there were signposts along the various roads directing travelers to Abraham's home. And furthermore, there were doors on four sides of the house so the weary wayfarer could have a prompt and easy entry. When the patriarch was weak following his circumcision, God brought out the sun to its full strength to discourage travelers so that Abraham could rest. However, the patriarch sat outside his home looking for them, so who he can extend his hospitality. And when God saw that this distress is not having guests was so intense, God sent 3 angels in the form of humans so that Abraham could enjoy the mitzvah of hachnasat orchim, of having guests. Obligations can be discharged grudgingly, as when we pay our taxes, or with love, as when we pay the expenses of our household. In either case, one is performing a duty. A husband who loves his wife and the father who loves his children will go beyond this, thinking of ways whereby he can bring them pleasure and cheer. He might bring home flowers or a little gift he knows his wife will enjoy. Upon seeing something he knows his children will take pleasure in, he may bring it for them. Even after a hard day's work, he will assist his wife with care of the children, the dinner dishes, knowing she may have had an exhausting day at work or taking care of the home. These are not obligations on a person, but they come out of love, out of the desire to give whatever pleasure one can to those one loves. This then is what constitutes chassidut. Fasting and self-mutilation do not give pleasure to God and are reserved for acts of penance for certain transgressions. True chassidut is seeking to do that which is pleasing to God above and beyond mandatory mitzvot. We are told that it is His will that we emulate His attributes to be merciful, kind, forgiving, and truthful. The more intense one love for God is, the more one will exert oneself to do His will and please Him. It is obvious that chassidut and abstinence are similar, and that in each case a person goes beyond that which is explicitly required of him. They differ only that in abstinence is an extra effort in avoidance of prohibited acts, whereas chassidus is extra effort in the performance of positive acts. In his discussion of abstinence, the Ramchal did not mention its similarity to chassidut, but from his discussion of chassidut, we can also get another perspective on abstinence. That a person who refrains from doing something that he knows would be displeasing to God, even if it's not in any way explicitly prohibited, either by scriptural or rabbinic law. So I think that's a really beautiful way also, when we went talking about abstinence and we were talking about feeling deprived, right? If you stay home from going out to an event because one of your kids needs you, right? And you don't have to. Right? Like maybe they're an adult child, or they're really okay. But you abstain from doing something that's your will, just something that would be nice for you, to do something for somebody else. You could feel very resentful. You could feel very deprived, because in those places, it's not coming from a sense of love. It could be coming from a sense of obligation, could be coming from a sense of what will people think of me, what will I think of me, of judgment, of criticism, of martyrdom. But when it's coming from a place of love, it's really an act of abundance. It's an act of chassidut. It actually turns that abstinence, that negative, that moving away from something prohibited, into something positive, into something that's coming closer to something that's beloved. And so I want to just sit with that for a second, because that's the whole chapter, succinct, to the point. And we have time to start how he divides it up, how we gain this idea of chassidut. But I want to just everyone to take a second and think about where you want to cultivate this idea in your own life. Okay. We're going to start chapter 19, the divisions of chassidut. There are 3 divisions of chassidut: the deed itself, how it's performed, and with the intention. The deed itself can be further subdivided into between man and God and man and his fellow man. Now, this is like word for word from the Shara Bitachon that we learned already, right? That in the Shara Bitachon, we learned that when we are only responsible for our effort to do the action and our intention, and whether or not we're successful or not is going to come from God. So he's talking here about the deed itself, right? Which we know is in God's control. How we do it, totally in our control. And our intention to want to do it in the first place, totally in our control. And just like in Shara Bitachon, he creates a separate category for things between man and God and things between man and fellow man. As regards to between man and God, this refers to the fulfillment of mitzvot and all their finite details. Although the mitzvot may be fulfilled without meticulous detail, the chassid will wish to do so in a manner that includes the finest details. We may better understand the quality of a mitzvah through an analogy from today's lifestyle. Every person has an innate desire to maintain his well-being. Nowadays, each cereal box and other packaged foods list the minimum daily requirements that connote bare essentials needed to function. But these minimum requirements fall much short of the desired levels of proper nutrition. Therefore, most people try to vary their diet by making generous use of the 4 recommended food groups and thus provide themselves with a sound, healthy diet. Some individuals are not satisfied with achieving these levels, which affect proper nutrition, and opt for an even higher standard by following a diet free of excess fat or white flour or sugar or milk products. They choose instead to grow organic fruits and vegetables or eat higher fiber fruits or take vitamins and supplements. Even though they can function at a satisfactory level with a normal regimen, they choose to enhance their capabilities with the use of extras. That's why we say food and nutrition and health are always discussed in any book on self-character development, because we cannot separate the body, the vessel that's doing all of this work, and the mind and the nervous system and all those things, which are physical things, with our intentions and our soul. They're all energy, right? It's all energy. Okay. So this is also true of many mitzvot. Etrog is a good example. Superficial blemishes caused in the natural growing process do not disqualify it. And it's not disqualified if it even grew without the little stem, pitom. But an unblemished esrog with a pitom is preferred, though not required, and many people go to great lengths to find such a beauty. For the average person, a minimum required mitzvah may suffice, but the chassid wishes his mitzvah to be enhanced with extras. Insofar as acts between man and his fellow man are concerned, chassidus requires constant benevolence toward others, avoiding any harm to body, soul, or possessions. Body means that one should endeavor to lighten another person's burden in whatever way possible, and if one can prevent or remove anything that's damaging to another, he should exert himself to do so. The mitzvah of gimilut chasadim, acts of benevolence, is one without limitation. One should do the utmost to be of a personal assistance to others in whatever way possible. The Talmud relates that Elijah told several sages that there were 2 people in the marketplace who were assured of a place of Gan Eden. The sages were curious. Who were these great mitzvot these people had done to get such a reward? They confronted them, asking, "Tell us, what are you doing here?" The men replied, "We are comedians. There are people here who are sad and disagreeable, and when we meet someone who's dejected, we try to amuse him and bring him cheer, and that way he will make peace with everyone. Visiting the sick, comforting the bereaved, bringing joy to a chatan and kala, a groom and bride, are some examples of easing another's burden, relieving his distress, increasing his happiness." So let's go back to our Shara Bitachon for a second, where we talked about our relationship with other people, that it's our responsibility as part of living in a state of trust where we know God is working on our behalf all the time and loves us. And we wake up and we're already worthy. So if we didn't have to hustle for worthiness all day, and we weren't worried about where our next meal was going to come from, and we really developed this sense of trust, and we loved God so much that we saw all other creations as extensions of God, how would we want to go about our day? Or, how, when we see someone in pain, how would we want to behave with them? How would we want to behave with somebody who's struggling? How would we want to behave with people who have needs and we have means, and needs meet needs, right? And all of that can only happen from that place of abundance, that place of safety. Because when you're not feeling safe and you don't really trust that you have enough, and you don't really trust that you're gonna be enough, or that you already are worthy, the way we go about the things isn't about them, it's about us. When we're sameach chatan and kala, it's about us. We're worried about how we're looking, we're thinking, right? It's all self-conscious, it's all angling. But when we come from that shar bitachon place, then all of our regular acts and behaviors can be elevated to chassidut. Thank you so much, Shulamit. And I think that I was listening today, there's, if you guys don't know, Chabad.org has an app, and they have the daily Torah portion, a daily Tanya portion, daily Tehillim Psalms, all in this app, totally free. And they'll read it to you in English, by the way. And, or you can just scan it yourself, and they have the Hebrew and English side by side. And I have sometimes, some downtime in the day when I'm eating. I shouldn't be listening to things while I'm eating, but since I will, instead of scrolling or reading a book, I listen to this, or if I'm cooking. And today's one was talking about charity, and was talking about these acts of kindness, and was talking about how God looks for people who are giving. And it's called the chitas, exactly. Yes, correct. So it's really cool, and it's free, and it's a great way to, again, I don't get it in every single day, but it's refreshed every day with something very relevant, and it's relevant spiritually, and it's relevant physically, because that's what we're doing. So today, the Tanya portion was talking about this idea of charity, and that you should never go back on how much you give. So if you always give $200 to this charity, the next year don't go and only give 100. Okay. And if you have an option of giving in small payments versus giving a huge amount at one time, it's actually better to give in small and in like every month versus a big sum once a year. Because charity is something that God is always like, in the app you get notifications. Charity is something that's constantly bringing you to God's attention, ki'ilu, in a very positive way. And so if there's something that, you need in some way, the more that you're giving on a consistent basis and you're showing up in that relationship consistently, when you give of your money, it's really something that is incredibly profound. People will give their lives, people will give time, and they won't give their money. So when we give our money, it's considered giving our actual blood. It's considering really making yourself a sacrifice, a korban, not in that you're sacrificing, but in that you're separating for holiness yourself. And so that's calling God's attention to you in a positive way. The same way a little heart text would show up in your phone, be like, oh, he's thinking of me, he loves me, right? It's like that's coming up for God, and that's reflected in the love coming back down to us. So here as well, this is all coming from a place of love. Even when we're refraining, that is also coming from a place of creating space. Okay. In addition, even if a person is unable to relieve the actual burden of one in need, it is always possible to empathize, sympathize, and share in the difficulties. The Torah states that when Moses was a prince in the palace of Pharaoh, he went out amongst his brethren and saw their travail. The Midrash states that he went amongst the slaves and lent his shoulders to help them carry their heavy loads. The actual hands-on help to a few people out of many thousands of slaves may have been pretty insignificant, but the awareness that he was participating in their distress was felt by everybody. Rabbi Yerucham Lifovitz explains that Moses' participation in the labor of the enslaved Israelites was more than a gesture to lift their spirits. He states that when one merely sees another's plight, even if one's emotions are aroused, the empathy with the suffering is incomplete. Moses felt he could not genuinely empathize with his brethren unless he personally felt the heavy weight on his shoulders and his back breaking under the burden. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, the Talmud states that sharing another person's burden is one of the requisites for acquiring Torah. Rabbi Yerucham points out that this trait of caring and sharing goes beyond the mitzvah of loving one's neighbor, since it's a prerequisite for the acquisition of Torah. This aspect of helping another is lacking when genuine gemilut chasadim is delegated to an agency. Thus, the chassid is not satisfied with discharging his obligation via an agent. He takes a personal interest and gives his own time and energy to provide for those in need, identifying with and genuinely sharing in other people's distress. I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I have heard from so many women who feel like I do that since October 7th, when you sit in silence and you're in that good meditative sometimes state, there's all of a sudden these tears. There's just all of a sudden this level of sadness. And I was really struggling with that for a bit because we're supposed to be feeling all this also gratitude for the things that are right and that they're not things that I'm personally experiencing. But that empathy, as long as we don't let it turn into unproductive behavior, when we turn it into productive behavior, is something that brings God joy, even if we don't feel joy us. The same way when someone is empathetic with us and our troubles, they don't need to be happy about it. But the fact that they sit with us in that moment and hold space for our feelings is as if you're actually doing something, you know? Some things are only God's to return, but standing and being present and being witness, even when it's painful, is also something that can be in that way joyful. The same way sometimes refraining from something feels like deprivation, but it's also a deepening of a relationship and a choosing of good. And it's just something that I've been feeling a lot lately, and this gives me some good context for that. Anybody have anything they want to share? Lala, Zipporah, anybody else who's on and not on video? Yeah, Shulamit.
Oh, just to mention also, obviously, thank you for sharing about my dad. That's really kind of you. And obviously, like the Chabad rabbi who was, I'm sure you heard the news. So perhaps, you know, like feeling in the sadness of that is really, I mean, it's just been making me close to tears all day. And maybe we could also learn in his honor also.
Yeah, do you have the name?
I'm going to Google it right now because I didn't.
Okay.
Hang on.
And since we're talking about Tanya and we're talking about Chassidut, right, could not be more apropos.
His name was Rabbi Tzvi Kogan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know his father's name, but I'm sure that's fine.
Right. God knows who he is.
Oh, he was also Tzvi. My father was Tzvi as well.
The Ramchal requires respect for public property, and it states that this too is subject to the Talmudic dictum, let your neighbor's property be as dear to you as your own. A chassid does not litter, he does not throw things out the car window, and is careful that his trash is properly contained so that it does not pollute the neighborhood. A person would not wish his home to be cluttered with garbage, and he should treat the public property as though it were his own. A Talmud who tells of a man who was cleaning his garden and was throwing rocks in the street. The chassid passed by and remarked, "Why do you take rocks from a property that does not belong to you and throw them into your own property?" The man laughed at the chassid's apparently senseless remark. A while later, the man lost all his money and had to sell his house walking along the street. He stumbled over one of the rocks he had thrown out of his garden. How wise that chassid was, he said, "My own property is something I can lose, whereas the public property is always mine." I think that's something that also applies to social media today and public spaces, and being very sensitive and how we account for ourselves in groups and chat rooms and conversations that are, a public discourse. Something we could all work on. Let your fellow man's belongings be as dear to you as your own. Requires some explanation. We may sometimes take liberties with our own possessions, treating them roughly, particularly if they are not very valuable. This does not give us a license to handle our neighbor's possessions carelessly. We must understand the Talmud to mean that we should care for at the least of our neighbor's belongings as much as we would care for our most precious valuables. That's how sensitive and considerate one must be to not impinge on another person, can be seen from the glory of Rabbi Yisrael Salant, who once visited the Warsaw. When word spread the great sage was in town, they gathered at the synagogue for mincha. How astonished everyone was that Rabbi Israel completed his prayers very quickly, which was a distinct departure from his usual lengthy prayer. Rabbi Israel explained, many people have closed their stores and shops to greet me. Extended my prayer would have caused them to wait longer, and I would have taken them away from their work and earnings. I cannot pray at someone else's expense. When the Chafetz Chaim wrote one of his books, he contracted with the yeshiva student to copy the manuscript for publication and set a price per page of 20 lines each. In reviewing the copy, the Chafetz Chaim found a number of pages with 22 lines. He hurried to the student's home and insisted on calculating how much additional money he owed for the extra lines. Prior to selling his books, the Chafetz Chaim would meticulously examine each one to make sure there was no missing pages or other defects in the printing. Some people today have copies of his books with corrections in his own handwriting. It is known that the Chafetz Chaim never wasted a single moment, but he used every available second for Torah study. For him to spend so much time leafing through each single book he sold indicates that he considered avoidance of possibly inadvertently selling defective merchandise to override even the study of Torah. As we said, this is aspirational, okay? And it's aspirational for all Jews. My daughter spent this Shabbos in Jerusalem, and they did Thursday in Tel Aviv, and they met with teenagers and different people of all different walks of Judaism. Between Thursday and on Shabbat, they met with Belz Hasidim and Gur Hasidim, and they all came and talked to them and had open dialogue with them. It was very interesting. And she said it was very interesting because obviously the idea of the army and all of the stuff that's happening right now came up. And she was bothered by girls who had come from such a narrow, single way of seeing things that they couldn't even understand that you weren't there to fight with them. You were there to hear their outlook and to understand where are people coming from. Like, how could people have a completely different worldview than you and both be thinking that you're doing the right thing or coming from the right place and with the right intentions? And I think it's something I was very proud of her for saying that. And at the same time, it's something that we all are constantly working on. We're allowed and justified to have our opinion of how we, in our culture, in our context, go about our chassidut. And I think one of the hardest things is seeing somebody who looks to be more observant than you, less observant than you, more outwardly choosing to be in God's army one way or another, right? To be a person of obvious Judaism and isn't behaving in one of these ways that we see here. And I know for myself, you want it, like something here came up and I had this picture in my mind of like, they don't do that, okay? Because I'm human. And in the meantime, one of my favorite things in ACT therapy that they talk about is we're not responsible for every thought that comes into our head, okay? We're not responsible for it. So that thought isn't me. It isn't my thought. It was a thought. My brain was thinking for a minute of an actual example that I witnessed of somebody not cleaning up after themselves in their garbage. Okay, moving on. Like, let it go like leaves in the wind. And I think that's also very important in this context while we're working on this midah, that we're going to have lots of judgmental thoughts that are not Hasidic thoughts, okay? They're not spiritual thoughts. Our mind was thinking for a minute something. It's not who we are, and it's not in contrast to the character traits that we are trying to intentionally have in the intentions and thoughts we're trying to have. That's my take that I want to put in here to continue to give us strength to persevere in faith of our own flaws, which are constantly coming up for us. Okay, I'd love to pause here and hear from anybody who has anything to share, anything they're related to today, anything that they have to offer. All of you guys have so much wisdom. Tzipora, anything that spoke to you today? No, you have to unmute, but we'll wait a second.
Okay, hello?
Yep,
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we hear you.
I got a new iPhone and it's doesn't work like it doesn't just show up to mute or unmute. I've got to figure out how to work it. But anyway, I think the only thing right now that's coming up for me, my mind keeps going to something because I need to work through it. And so I'm like, I'm hearing everything but it's like my mind keeps going back. And so
Mm,
on Rosh Hashanah, like what happens is like I go to my highest self and then I feel like I get humiliated and it just triggers
mm,
stuff from my childhood. And so
mhm,
then I just kind of want to shut down. And then like there goes being my highest self and when you talked about right in the beginning, at the end of lesson 18 or chapter 18, about like a husband and it's like a good, like God is a good friend and all this kind of stuff. So especially when I'm doing a mitzvot and I'm like hosting a bunch of people and I'm working for weeks to like create something so beautiful, and then someone does something that makes me feel humiliated, um, that I need to realize like it's not what they're saying or how they're acting or whatever. It's like it's about God and going and looking to Hashem that He is my good friend. Um and somehow not taking those things personally. Um and so that's just kind of, where my mind keeps going to because it just needs to process it. And yeah, so that was helpful. Kind of, I'm trying to figure out how to um, really kind of like actively do that, in a way, or think about that,
mhm.
and actualize that way so I don't shut down, um, and keep wanting to do the mitzvot and keep wanting to show up, um, and not being judgmental and being more accepting of just what is, and yeah.
Constant effort. Thank you so much for sharing that. Lala, you have something you want to say? I was thinking that this would be a good one for you to jump in on.
Well, I love the group because my brain was kind of going the exact same way as Sephora's. And I was thinking that it's been something that I've really, really worked on this year as life has shifted so much. That I find when I show up and I have either resentment or sadness or, feel humiliated, any one of those types of things, that I have realized that, well, one, I'm not going and doing really truly enjoy, which has been hard to find this year. But I think like what I've realized is that, and I'm not sure exactly how to say this, but like, is that I'm finding that I thought I was really good at creating boundaries, and that the more I can figure out how to create boundaries and different kinds of boundaries than a year ago, like I just need different things and they're not harsh, but when I can be clear with myself on the boundary and be able to place that, then it's like a protection. It's like my covenant with myself and with God, that then as I move forward, that I don't feel I can go in a better way. But what I'm recognizing is that it's not that I've totally figured out the boundary thing and how to make it work, but I've figured out that when the resentment comes up, when the feeling bad comes up, when I feel like the shoulds, like, so when I feel like I should be doing this in joy, I should be, and it's more moved to obligation, that I feel like, oh, if I actually figure out a way to put a boundary in, not like, no, I'm not doing it, but a way that I'm like being true, like I can only do this for a half an hour today, or I can only do this much. I can't do what I could do a year ago. I just am not capable. And that when I'm like, I don't know really how to word this, but when I can have the conversation with myself first, then I feel like I can head to something in a better way. Because I've had to make my boundaries bigger to just not fall apart, which is like, I feel like I know this is related to Bitachon in such a big way, because I can, when I do figure out how to show up as authentically me and protecting myself, like mothering myself and taking care of myself so that I don't feel those horrible things, then it's like, I'm like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be. So the boundary I made with myself and with the other person, I feel like the other person is happier that I have done that too, because then I show up like my whole self in a good way. But I feel like this is a very new thing. I felt like, oh gosh, I'm at this age, I won't have to do that. Or I can just be like, no, but the no sometimes isn't what I want either. It's become this nuanced balance with myself that I'm really, I don't know. I thought I had done this. I wasn't going to be doing it, but I feel like this year the protection of like you said, the crying when, like, that's a boundary like that I allow myself. Like there's boundaries that are opening and boundaries that are are protection ones,
Yeah.
because I don't want to feel like I can't feel sad or I can't do those things, because then they process through you, I guess. And
Yeah.
but like I find, like, so when those signs come up, oh, I feel resentful. Oh, that means, so I go that way, whereas I used to not. I go, oh, that is my message, actually. The resent is like this, or like I'm feeling this way, or whatever. And it's been a new way through figuring out, because I think I felt like I was over kind of all that. I had that all under control, you know? So it's a new thing, but I do feel
Yeah.
like, oh, and I also feel like it's a really nice obligation to self
Yeah.
to actually ask myself, why am I feeling resentful?
Mhm.
That's not how I want to walk in the world, but I don't force myself to go do something. I try to figure out why, or I just need more time. I need more space. I need more solitude. I can't just show up every day and joy right now. It's just doesn't work for me. So I know, I don't know, it's a lot of words.
No,
No, so beautiful.
I think it's, can you hear me? I don't know if I'm on
Yeah,
mute.
we hear
I
you.
think Lala, I think it's beautiful. And I think like what I'm hearing is of having this thread of self-compassion and kindness um and being open to, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Because all of those resentments and feelings have a really powerful message. And so like I just, it's like instead of shutting down those thoughts, it's like, oh wait, why am I feeling this way? Why do I not want to get out of bed and just shut down? Oh wait, that's why. Because I feel like I get slapped in the face when I do something, like metaphorically, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like listening to those messages and having compassion, like being able to be open to like what I'm feeling and is allowing myself to have compassion for where my mind is going, so I can figure out, like, so I can befriend myself and figure out, wait, and that's Bitachon, like that's Dafka faith, because if I if I am open to what my messages are, then I have faith in Hashem and I have faith you know, in the goodness of it all. And then just one quote that I was going through old papers and on a little post-it, I found this thing that was written, this phrase, and it said, worry is to worry about something is humiliation, and to have faith in Hashem is dignity. And I was like, huh, I don't know why I just came across that or who wrote it or what, but it's like, um, I'd much rather have faith and dignity and I mean, worry is different than what I was talking about before, but just like that thread of what you're saying of compassion and kindness and wait, why am I feeling this? And it's okay to feel this, and to have those boundaries of self-care, and to know that it's all good and there's a reason for it all, and allowing ourselves the opportunity to kind of like, you know, acknowledge that so we can come to a higher understanding. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Shulamit, you had something to add?
Wow, no, that was just so beautiful. Thank you for sharing, both of you. It was really landed, all the things like what you said, Lily, and what they said, and it's all coming together. Like I had a bit of a day. I was triggered by, I've paid for a rental apartment and it wasn't at all what I expected. This is the Middle East, it is Israel, but still, I mean, there was levels of neglect in this apartment that I've moved into. And it was more than just the money part and I paid part, and I sort of did sit with the feelings that came up around it, and I realized that I'd been triggered because when I opened the cupboards and I saw all dirty old things, not to say that in my parents' house it was like that, but there was certain situations where I found myself, like my mum was a Holocaust survivor and she used to hoard things and old things, and I promised myself as a young child, I'm not going to live like that. I want to live fresh and clean, and I didn't feel safe in that. And so just bringing that understanding to, of course I'm going to feel triggered, that's okay, and I am safe now, and that was then and this is now, and I don't have to make it mean anything, but I can also presence that little one that was frightened, all the things. And when you talk about Chassidut, when you think about Chassidim and Chassidus, and you think, oh, they take on so many things and it's kind of scary and negative. And when I think about it, the word Chassidut comes from chesed, kindness, and the way that you described it, like a gentle boundary, to be careful not to hurt somebody, to be careful to do more than what we need to do for somebody. That's how you look after a little child, isn't it? And that's how we need to look after ourselves first, so that we can safely presence others. So for me, this chapter about Hasidus has been really enlightening. Thank you. And also just hearing other people's shares, so beautiful, really. All your ideas are so beautiful. Thank you. And there was one last thing. What was it about? I was like, yeah, when you do presence that little one and in others, then you are seeing the divine in them and in you. That was your original thing, Lillian, when you were talking about how can we react with other people when we see Hashem in them. And it's so funny because just this morning, my non-Jewish, she's African coach, she's an energy coach, she just came online to say that thing, that she just had a thought today, what if I could see the divine in every single person that I come across, whether it's a client or that all links together beautifully. Sorry, I'm going to switch off because my phone is ringing.
Yeah, and that's it. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place. Tell friends, increase the community, and the recording will also be available probably tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Yes,
Lily, when you say like tell friends, so I can just go ahead and forward that Zoom link to them and say,
so
hey,
they
I'm
have
doing
to come to the WhatsApp group, just so we make sure we don't get crazy people on Zoom, because I unlocked the room, so they can come to the WhatsApp group and then they can get the link from there.
Oh, I don't think I'm on the WhatsApp group. Am I? Maybe I am. I don't know. Okay, I have to check.
Okay. Make sure you're in the WhatsApp group. Ask Stacy to add you or send you the link. To make sure you're in the WhatsApp group, because that's where I post the reminder, or if there's not going to be class, God forbid it's canceled for some reason, that's where those go out. Anybody who wants is welcome to join the WhatsApp group and then join the Zoom calls.
Okay, and what's the name of the WhatsApp group?
Bitachon class.
Okay, got it.
All right, let me look. Yeah,
So
Bitachon
we can
weekly
like
class.
do a search for that.
Yeah, Bitachon weekly class.
Sounds good.
Okay. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lily.